We lost our 16-year-old son to fentanyl poisoning in 2021. And since then, we have made it our mission to use our voice in any way possible to spread awareness and educate others about the dangers of illegally manufactured fentanyl. Cooper was an adventure. He was fearless. He loved life. I mean, it was just fun. I mean, from the moment he came into this world, he was so much fun, so full of life. There was no such thing as too high or too fast in his world. And he was just fun, I could watch him do the things he loved to do for hours because he was entertaining and just, one word is adventurous. But he also, he had this fast side, but he also had a very soft side. He had a very kind heart. He had a real big soft spot for kids with special needs. He was so patient in teaching a boy he had come to know, a teenage boy who was pretty much nonverbal, but he taught this boy how to fly a kite. He had immense patience and just, a big heart to be able to do something like that. He also was the type of kid when he was young, if we were, downtown somewhere in a city where there was some unhoused people living, he would not let us walk by without begging us to offer, that person in need something, because he just had a bleeding heart in that way. We say Cooper was independent to a fault. By the time this kid was 2, well, probably before 2, it was probably about 18 months, he would get out of his crib, which wasn't a crib anymore. We had to turn it into a toddler bed pretty early because he'd just climb out of the crib. But he'd go in the kitchen and hop up on the counter and bake and put his Eggo waffle in the toaster all by himself. Like, he didn't need help. He was that kid that could do it all on his own. And that became a challenge the older that he got. He definitely didn't want to fit the mold of a typical teenager. He didn't feel the need for parenting, and he was very resistant to the guardrails that we as parents tried to keep in place for him. So, he was hard-headed, He was hard-headed, strong-willed, and could definitely be a challenge at times. And so that adventurous spirit that he had, of course, drew him to some experimentation. Probably not right away, but eventually we came to know that he probably experimented with marijuana in the 8th grade, possibly in the 7th grade. And, we caught him with it on a couple of occasions. We didn't feel at any time that he was using it excessively. But there was a time right before we lost Cooper that, we were really trying to get him away from using marijuana, and he was being drug tested regularly, so he had switched it up on us and started using some synthetic marijuana because, he had been advised that that would help him pass the drug tests. So that's what we thought we were dealing with the day that we lost Cooper, because we had no idea that illicit fentanyl was a thing and that it was really a crisis in our country. So we were really surprised the day that we lost Cooper, because I'm a nurse and my husband's a nurse anesthetist. My husband gives fentanyl every day he goes to work. I've given fentanyl many a time in my nursing career, But even being in the medical field, neither one of us had heard about illegally manufactured fentanyl and that it was coming into our country in unprecedented amounts. So we were blindsided by this topic. You know, we thought we were trying to keep a teenage kid from smoking a little weed from time to time, and we did not know how deadly the drugs that are available to our youth had become. Cooper's girlfriend had kind of clued us in. We were suspicious that it was synthetic marijuana, and she came clean once when she was mad at him. She started spilling the beans and said he's been using, you know, Tukey. I'm like, what is Tukey? It's synthetic marijuana. And she said, she made the comment, it will fry your brain. And so we knew, I mean, this was probably a week before Cooper passed. We knew that this could end up being a significant problem and had every intentions of figuring out what we needed to do next. So it was a Sunday afternoon. Cooper was at a friend's house, not someone that we knew. And I got a call from his girlfriend, Cooper's girlfriend, saying that the paramedics were at this friend's house and she thought something was wrong with Cooper. And I said, well, text me the address. And before she could do that, I got a call from our local police department saying that Cooper was having a medical emergency at this address and we needed to get there as soon as possible. So we got to the home, and there was, of course, fire and paramedics on site. A police officer instructed us to wait in the driveway, which we did, and I think one of the lead paramedics came out to give us an update and started talking about what they were doing. And I just looked at her and I said, "Are you attempting to resuscitate him?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "How long has it been?" And she said it'd been about 40 minutes. So we knew it was a grave situation. But she proceeded to tell us that there was something in his heart rhythm that they had seen that gave him a little bit of spark of hope, and they wanted to go ahead and transport him to the hospital. So they did that, and they wheeled him out of that house with a machine pumping his chest. And even as a nurse, I had not seen this machine that they use, which I'm sure is a wonderful life-saving machine. But watching it violently pump the chest of your firstborn son is an image that you will never forget. So we went to the hospital and waited a bit, and the physician came out to give us an update. Said, you know, that they had tried to get some labs, and some of the labs weren't reading, which we also knew was not a good sign. But he said he wanted to give it a few more minutes and try to repeat some things to see if he can get something to register. But before he could finish his conversation with us, he was summoned back into the room. And the next thing we knew, we were being told that Cooper was not coming back to us. And we were invited in that emergency room to say our goodbyes. And that, of course, was the worst day of our lives. We knew that day that he had been given Narcan, a lot of Narcan. We still didn't know exactly why. I think we probably just assumed that, just in case, because they probably didn't know what exactly had gone on either prior to their arrival, so they probably gave it just in case. But nobody mentioned it. We obviously didn't know about the crisis, but I think it was either later that evening or the next day. Again, Cooper's girlfriend reached out to me and said, I think he got, and I forget how she worded it, but I think he got one of those fake pills. And, still, I'm clueless. Like, I didn't know what that meant. And I'm not even sure what happened next. I don't know if I Googled, I don't know if she told me more. She knew that he had taken what they thought were Percocet, so a bluey, might have been what she called it, or a Perc 30. I don't know. She wasn't entirely sure either, but that was our first inclination that it wasn't synthetic marijuana. But we knew, there was a toxicology report pending. And probably 6 weeks later, that suspicion was verified. We got his toxicology report, and they found 3 things in his system, actually: caffeine, Narcan, and fentanyl. And that was all. And we, would also learn that there were 5 people present. Some were high school age, some were just out of high school age, so young adults. But there were 5 people that shared 2 pills that day. Cooper was the only one that did not survive. And yeah, it sounds unbelievable, but, over these past, and it's almost 2.5 years now, I've learned more than I ever wanted to about illegally manufactured fentanyl, and it makes perfect sense to me how much fentanyl, deadly fentanyl, can be in one counterfeit pill, and how even just a portion of that pill, if it had been split in half, it could be primarily, condensed to the one side, to a quarter of that pill, and take a life, whereas whoever may consume the other parts of that pill might be fine. So now it makes perfect sense because of how inexperienced the manufacturers are, if you can call them manufacturers. The people creating the fentanyl don't know what they're doing. The people pressing it into counterfeit pills don't know what they're doing. They're not scientists, they're not chemists. There is no way to do a quality check or a control to see if what they're putting out is the right amount, what it should be, before it gets into the hands of an unknowing teenager. Well, the United States has not addressed this issue the way it needs to be addressed. The toll it has taken, the number of deaths that it has produced is being somewhat ignored, I think. I mean, in my mind, it's taking enough lives that the United States should have a COVID-like response to this crisis. And that has never happened. And people use the analogy, we lose nearly 200, probably more than 200 Americans a day, which is equivalent to, a jet plane falling out of the sky and taking that many lives. And Jelly Roll just said this on, he testified somewhere, and he said, If a jet plane was falling out of the sky every day, the world would stop until a solution was found. And in the same regard, my focus is really on teenagers because that is a bucket of new victims of this crisis. Having fentanyl in the drug supply, of course, affects the population that already struggles with substance use disorder. But the population that it's also affecting in probably, almost worse, the death rates of teenagers has just skyrocketed because they're unaware. They're first-time users, they're naive, they're experimenting, they're self-medicating. There's so many reasons why they might turn to a pill because they think it's going to help them in some way, and they don't even survive. So we're losing a classroom full of high school students every week in this country to fentanyl. And that doesn't really seem to create an urgency either. So, one takeaway is we need to do more. Another takeaway is there's still so many people that don't know what's happening and don't know about the dangers, especially as it relates to our teenagers. So we need to be educating more. Education needs to be in the schools. Families need to be talking about it because the third takeaway is this can happen to any family in America. It does not discriminate, and it doesn't matter where these kids are coming from, what kind of home life they have. They could have a perfect home life, and fentanyl could still be in your home. It could be delivered to your home. Because the drug cartels have a pretty excellent business plan, and that's what this is. This is a business for them. It's a $500 billion business, and they chose the United States for a reason. They chose fentanyl for a very good reason. It's odorless, it's tasteless, it's easy to smuggle across the border. It's highly addictive, very cheap, and their main goal is to drive addiction, which they know the United States already has struggled with addiction in the past. Related to opioids, those were actually pharmaceutical opioids when we had our first crisis in our country, and those effects are still lingering. We still do struggle with addiction in our country, and they know this. And they're bringing fentanyl in because they want to drive addiction and create repeat users. So those buyers come back again and again and again. And our teenagers are just collateral damage.